Good evening, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us once again on this wonderful Sunday of a new month. It is really the 2nd of October 2022. We are almost close to the end of the Gregorian calendar. And umtungo uyongwayo, umalinge undima, unkumbuzo, unkome bomvu kamalinge. Uyanamkela once again on this wonderful episode of Pont de Politique. Remember, for those that do not know where we are found, we are available on various social media platforms. Make sure that you follow us and you subscribe on our YouTube channel. There is it, you can see it at Pont de Politique. We need as many followers and as many numbers as possible because we are trying to build a consistent base when it comes to this particular podcast that is, or this particular platform, sorry, that continuously provide a fundamental and a political content. And I say without any fear of contradiction that Pont de Politique provides one of the best political knowledge this country has ever produced. So we are also available on Twitter. If you are watching with us on Twitter, make sure that you are retweeting and you are liking our content. On Facebook, you will notice that on Facebook, we are available on the events because there's a new program that has been put in place on Facebook. We are also available on Instagram. And lastly, those nice, wonderful videos that are also available on TikTok. So at TikTok, Pont de Politique, and all other platforms, we are equally available. So today we are going to be discussing one of interesting topics that one of the topics that I find very much interesting. It is about Pan-Africanism and whether it is regarded as or it is an unreal ideal, the relevance of, if one were to say, the relevance of Pan-Africanism. And you would notice also, I want to apologize because I'm in a little bit of a dark place. So today we are again in a dark city. The electricity blackouts in South Africa are a continuous thing, and we do that every day. So if my lighting is not that proper, you must understand that we are in the dark city. But before we speak about anything that relates to this topic, I want to play for you this video, because this video provides a little bit of an understanding as to what is it that we want to talk about, and it provides some element of an insight as to the real story and the relevance of the question that we are trying to. Please enjoy, and just after a few minutes, you are entitled to make your submissions, your comments, your questions on everything else that we will be talking about. But fundamentally, we want to inquire about Pan-Africanism and also whether it is an unreal or a real idea, because for some people, it has been criticized like that. So enjoy this video for a few minutes,
He's
and then we
posting
will take it from
14
there.
former colonies to pay for colonization. The fact that several African countries have been under the influence of the French for about 75 years now is incomprehensible. Unable to let its colonies go, France continues to exploit African countries with unfair obligation, one of which has raised a raging debate over the years. Debt colonial tax, the infamous obligation on CFA franc zone members, requires them to keep 50% of their foreign exchange reserves in an operational account held at the French treasury. The French were reluctant to allow their colonies to have complete freedom. Thus, the colonial rulers felt that their colonies should not benefit from the infrastructure and other development efforts they had made. In Guinea, for example, the French destroyed everything they could not take back to their country. They burnt food, killed cows, and destroyed buildings and books. These outrageous actions were all because Guinea wanted independence. Other colonies that made efforts toward independence met resistance from the French in the form of coups that ex-French foreign legionnaires implemented against elected presidents. Seeing that the fight for independence was inevitable, France decided to grant its colonies free rule. Educational system and its military commercial preferences. The colonial pact between France and its former colonies indicates a ruler that was not ready to let go. The European nation has benefited from this pact because the African countries contribute up to 500 billion US dollars to its treasury every year. The obligation that France subjected these countries to during the colonial pact include 1. Paying for the infrastructure France built during colonization. 2. Keeping 50% of their foreign reserve in the French treasury, with 14 African countries having been doing this for years. Interestingly, these countries can only access 15% of their reserves each year. If they need more, they have to borrow it. 3. France has the first right to purchase any natural resource discovered. 4. French companies have dibs on all government procurement bids. 5. Senior military officers are only to be trained in France. 6. France has the right to deploy its military in the African countries and make French the official language both in education and in communication. 7. Using the French colonial currency, former colonies have to send a reserve report to France. 8. Ex-colonies cannot enter into military alliances with other countries without approval from France. And lastly, ex-colonies are required to join forces with France during war or a global crisis. The ex-French colonies that agreed to this pact did so because they were afraid of facing the same consequences that other colonies experienced. The colonial tax has been viewed as a form of exploitation and neocolonialism. This is because the countries do not have control over their own currency and France is seemingly holding them hostage. The lack of control for these 14 countries has made a fraction of them look for a way out. An example of their lack of control is that they have no idea how much of the funds they send to the French treasury belongs to them. In March 2008, former French President Jacques Chirac said, quote, "Without Africa, France will slide down into the ranks of a third world." Mitterrand already prophesied in 1957 will have no hit in the 21st century. Currently, these 14 countries are obliged by France through this exploitative colonial pact to put 85% of their foreign reserve into France's central bank under French Minister of Finance control. African leaders who refused are either killed or victims of coups, while those who obey are supported and rewarded by France with a lavish lifestyle while their people endure poverty and desperation. It's such an evil system, even denounced by the European Union, but France is not ready to move from that colonial system, which puts about $500 billion from Africa to its treasury year in, year out. African leaders are often accused of corruption and serving Western nations' interests instead, but there is a clear explanation for all that behavior. They behave so because they are afraid of being killed or victims of coups. They want a powerful nation to back them in case of aggression or trouble. But, contrary to a friendly nation protection, the Western protection is often offered in exchange of these leaders denouncing to serve their own people or nation's interests. France is indebting and enslaving Africans by means of Africans' own wealth. France grants credits to Africa with exaggerated interest rates of 5 to 6% or even more. The allegory of bleeding Africa and freeing France is unfortunately no exaggeration, but something that needs to come to an immediate stop. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, follow, share, and like our video.
Yes, you have heard what I'm sure you might have enjoyed that video, and you have heard some of the atrocities that are being done in the African continent by the former colonialists. And one of the things that are currently happening in the current world is that the former colonialists and the former colonists continue to take away from the African continent what is available, and they continue to determine how things must be done. So I'm giving this video because it provides a little bit of a background of the fact that at some point between 1960 and 1963, two fundamental organizations were established. One of them is not highly known because of the foundations of patriarchy in our society, where the Pan-African Women's Organization was established in 1962, a year before the establishment of the Organization of African Unity. African women organized themselves, put themselves together to establish PAO, and from then onwards, the men's conference, if one were to say, it was then established in 1963. So that is one aspect which is important in the Pan-African orientation and the Pan-African discussion, is that we must never think that the OAU was the determinant only of Pan-Africanism, but women had done that a year before the OAU, but because of the patriarchal societal norms in our continent and in our world, the history of the world has become the his story, and it didn't include her story, and therefore did not include the story of the majority of the people. So in 1963, this is the second biggest thing that happened, was the establishment of the Organization of African Unity, which has been seen fundamentally whenever people are talking about Pan-Africanism, they would always refer to that particular establishment. So please, if you are watching, ensure that you are engaging with us. I need your comments. I need your questions. I need this to be an interactive conversation. And please ensure that you are sharing this video. Firstly, the question that we want to engage on is whether Pan-Africanism is an unreal ideal. Is it a real or an unreal ideal? But before we get there, most of the time when people are talking about Pan-Africanism, they tend to talk about things that majority of people don't get interested in. So for me, I hope that I can speak about things that you might be interested in. One of the things that you are going to be interested in probably is the fact that I'm going to be criticizing one of the greatest activists in Zimbabwe. His name is Rutendo Matinyarare. Yeah, he's one of the greatest activists in Zimbabwe. I'll be making a critique against him and how he views that. He says that Julius Malema is not a Pan-Africanist. First of all, you must understand that I don't have time for Julius Malema. I don't have any allegiance to him, and I don't believe that he could be the credible leader to lead the interest of the African people. But to state that, as Rutendo would say, that he is not a Pan-Africanist, I think I want to make an argument and say, I think Rutendo's reasoning around Julius's not being a Pan-Africanist is a little bit faulty or is a little bit unfair. Now, one of the principles that provides unity, one of the principles that or where there's a convergence around Pan-Africanism is that Pan-Africanism seeks to unite the African people or the continent. So that is one of the elements that is you find the agreement, the unity of the African people or the unity of the continent. Whether you want to talk about the unity of the African people or the unity of the continent as the same thing, I'm separating it deliberately. So that is one aspect that I can tell you that in Pan-Africanism, there is no disagreement there. That is the only, also from my reading of Pan-Africanism, that there is an agreement, where there is an agreement regarding the unity of the African people or the unity of the continent. That's where it ends, from my understanding. Any other aspect of how is that unity going to be achieved, at what pace, and what would be the economic model when that unity has taken place, I don't think that Pan-Africanists or Pan-Africanism or Pan-Africanisms, if one were to say, they have an agreement in that particular aspect. And that is where my engagement is at. Now, if you look at the establishment of the OAU, leading to the establishment of the OAU, there was two groups of people who were engaging on the developments or who were foreseeing the conference of the OAU. And this group of people was looking forward to ensuring that the establishment of what we would call the OAU, how it is going to be defined, what is going to be outlook, what are going to be their essence. Now, there were two groups of people. One of them was it was led by Kwame Nkrumah, who was the president of Ghana, and the other one was also led by the group that was led by Julius Malema, who was to be the president of Tanzania, Tanganyika for some people. And these groups became to be known as the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group. Now, out of both of these groups, who are stating that they want African unity under the banner of African nationalism, both of them were agreeing that they want to have a unity of the African people. Both of them, they agreed, these two groups. But amongst these two groups, there was something that was a disagreement. The other group was saying, no, let us do this thing. As the Monrovia group was saying, no, let us do this gradually. Let us use the approach of a gradualist approach in the unity of the continent. And then there was another group led by Kwame Nkrumah and President Toure and the others. That group was saying, no, we are not going to eat this elephant in bits and pieces. Let us eat it now, finish, you understand? And the group of Nkrumah was the group that came out and was saying the loudest voice was Nkrumah's voice, Toure's voice, Haile Selassie's voice. They were saying that we must unite or perish. That was that group. The other group was saying, no, let us engage on this unity of the African people in small stages. Let us do the regionalism and all of those things. But additionally to that, the economic model of the unity of Africa, there was also a disagreement there. The Nkrumah group was saying, no, we must unite under the banner of socialism. When these other ones were actually saying, no, let us unite under the open market. Now, if you look at the history books, you would understand that there was this dynamic or this the Cold War that was taking place also at the time. There was a group which would have been regarded as a group that moves with the Soviet East, and also the other group that would have been moving with the global Northwest, if one were to refer to that. So there were these two dynamics. And unfortunately, whether I want to agree with it or not, but I want you as my viewers to understand that the group of the gradualists, the group that was led by Julius Nyerere and his crew, it won the conference. And at the end of the conference, the OAU's establishment became, its principles were the principles that were in line with the gradualist approach. So gradualism was what was then accepted, and it then defined what we would know as the OAU. And later in the years, in 2002 in Durban in South Africa, OAU was therefore changed or renamed to a African Union. Majority of the people, especially those who would then subscribe to the line of Nkrumah's group, they would say the AU is a toothless bulldog. You understand? So there is that dynamic, and then the other group that did not win, maybe some elements of their submissions could have been adopted by the OAU and the AU. I don't know how to what level, but one of the things that I were to tell you is that the Monrovia gradualist group did not won the day, and it has been the one that has been leading the debate around Pan-Africanism not in South Africa, in the African continent and in the world. So it has even defined the OAU and later AU's stances on geopolitics and domestic politics as well. So the policy formulation of the African Union, the aspirations, the decisions, including the bilaterals that are being adopted, they're adopted on the basis of that gradualist approach. One of the things that you must then know, 10 years later, Julius Nyerere came back and said that actually Nkrumah was correct. The Nkrumah's approach was the correct one. I think he might have realized that the gradualist approach was not going to be helpful in one way or the other. So I'm showing you these separations, and I want you to understand that Pan-Africanism in its popular discourse currently, as in 2022, the popular discourse of Pan-Africanism, which is one you would find whether it is real Pan-Africanism or not. For some people, they would say, no, it's not. But Pan-Africanism, as you understand it, represented by the AU and the Pan-African Parliament, is taken, or takes its roots from that gradualist perspective. Now, the people who then took over the elements of that radical outlook in the contemporary politics was then Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, may his soul rest in peace, who was then killed in 2011. So he then became the one that would take that baiting, and I think at some level, President Mugabe might also have been one of those people that have taken that particular line. So there has always been, since the formation of the OAU, or since that discussion, that there's two lines of understanding how do we unite the African people. Others say gradualist, others say we would call it now a revolutionary outlook. Now, on the side of the gradualist, Thabo Mbeki has then become the representative of that gradualist approach. So if you want to understand the two approaches of, if one were to say, the Monrovia and Casablanca group, look at Thabo Mbeki's outlook in how he defines, determines, and influences political, international policy, domestic policy, and economic policies. His presidency was a clear interpretation of what it means to Pan-Africanism within that dynamic of a gradualist approach. And there are other examples that I've given you. Now, I stop there. I am done with that historical relation aspect. Now, over the past few weeks, there has been a conversation and a video that has been going around, and it was happening in a platform of Penwell the Black. I think it's called the Penwell Show, one of the famous podcasts in our country. So this video was circulating on TikTok, where Rutendo, who is an Rutendo Matinyarare, a Zimbabwean activist who is a Pan-Africanist as well. So he argues that Julius Malema is not a Pan-Africanist. Do I agree whether Julius Malema is a Pan-Africanist or not? I'm going to answer that question when I'm done. Now, Rutendo says that Julius Malema is not a Pan-Africanist because he gives few reasons. I think the three prominent reasons are: one, he says that Julius Malema's articulation, if he was a Pan-Africanist, he's not gagged in the public media, and therefore, because he's not gagged, because his content is not gagged by the imperialist media, which is in South Africa, which is managed extensively or owned by white people. He's not gagged. So for the sake that Julius Malema is not gagged, is not being limited in his discussion, therefore he is not a Pan-African. One of the reasons. The second, Julius Malema had a case with SARS and others, and he therefore said, because white people, or he calls it white monopoly capital in South Africa, because they see him as no threat. He might talk about Pan-Africanism, but he's not a threat because he's not a Pan-Africanist, and therefore there is no reason that people would gag him or would close off his submissions on the basis that no, he's not a Pan-Africanist. Therefore, he was not even found guilty for the case of what is this case of the case of his what is this his tax problems. So he says because of that, because Julius was not found guilty for that, so it means therefore Julius Malema is not a Pan-Africanist. You see, so that was the second aspect, and the third one, which I thought it was, he says that because Julius Malema is what was the third one? I think the third one was that even on public media, he's not being affected. Now, here is my problem with that thinking. Is that he is raising all the issues that relate to the personal things that are about Julius. But what would I say about Julius, whether Julius is a Pan-Africanist or not? I think by arguing that on the basis of these three reasons, you therefore say he's not a Pan-Africanist, I think he is being really unfair on him. Because there are many people who refer to themselves as Pan-Africanists and they have never been gagged. There are many of them. Thabo Mbeki is referred to himself as a Pan-Africanist. He's never been gagged. So why would you then make an allegation regarding that? You understand? So that is one aspect. There are other people as well who have not been gagged as well because they claim to be Pan-Africanist. So I don't think it is fair that because he's not found guilty, then you could base that he's not a Pan-Africanist on the basis that he's not found guilty because he's not gagged, he's not shadow blocked on Twitter and the media, he's got access to media and so on and so forth. So there's a dynamic there. I've got a problem with that thinking. But also we've got, I know that there's a comment here by Thabo that I want. I think he refers to that point that I made about Julius Nyerere. He says Julius Nyerere was an ego-free leader who was willing to accept that he was in the wrong. And I think that is a good comment, and that is a good sign of a real leader. So I think Rutendo is really unfair to Julius on that basis. But here is me coming in and arguing whether Julius Malema is a Pan-African. I don't think Julius Malema is a Pan-Africanist, on the basis that even his organization's outlook, he has said it himself. They say it in their policy documents that they are a Marxist-Leninist. What is it? Marxist-Leninist something. There are three. I think Marxist-Leninist. What is the third one? Please remind me. But they have clearly stated that they are a Marxist-Leninist. There's a third one. There's a third leg organization, and on the basis of that, a Marxist-Leninism is not a Pan-Africanism idea or a Pan-Africanist idea. It is not. So on the basis of that, he could have made that argument and say, maybe on the basis that he has adopted Marxist-Leninism and what the third one, then he is not a Pan-Africanist. But to say that he is not a Pan-Africanist on the basis of the fact that he's not gagged, and I don't think that is a little bit. I think it's not fair for Julius Malema. But also Julius belongs into a group. That's why Julius, when he came into the mainstream politics, he has all of a sudden been brought even to become a member of the Pan-African Parliament, which sits at different times here at in Midrand in South Africa. And what is very strange, because you remember I said earlier, the dominant Pan-Africanism that is taking place in the continent or in the world, the dominant, I'm not saying the only one, the dominant is the one that is gradualist in its approach and in its outlook. So if you look at the people who are mostly in that Pan-African Parliament, those that are always speaking the loudest are those that are coming from that gradualist approach. The scholars of late, I was at Mistra in some conference on Monday or Tuesday last week. There they were talking about pragmatic Pan-Africanism. Julius Malema belongs into that group. And in South Africa, the majority of people, especially those who come from the ANC, they adhere to that idea of a pragmatic Pan-Africanism. And one of the things that they say about Pan-Africanism is that the Pan-Africanism, which is the leg of Pan-Africanism that was pushed by Nkrumah and Cabal, is unrealistic. And so therefore, it does not speak to the bread and butter issues. Even I think the party that represents Pan-Africanism in South Africa, the PAC, also there is that struggle between or amongst themselves, where there is this discussion that no, the party must be part of the bread and butter issues. It must deal with the issues of relevance. Yeah, so there is that domination now of the outlook of Pan-Africanism. But then, when you look at that, it is called a pragmatic Pan-Africanism. And maybe it's another way of saying a gradualist approach to Pan-Africanism. And it is dominant. So Thabo Mbeki, Julius Malema, and the others who are pushing even the AU, the dominant narrative of Pan-Africanism, as you understand it, is a Pan-Africanism that is a pragmatic in a way that it has got elements of fear, cowardice, and so on and so forth. So you must understand it in that dynamic, but also at the same time with the so-called realities of the geopolitics. Now, why do people say that this is the best approach, the dominant approach? They say because it is able to balance itself between these superpowers, China currently, and the Americas, the USA on the other side, and the geopolitics also in the north. Look at this in the conversation around Ukraine and Russia. look at South Africa and how it was saying. They would say, we are not going to vote, we are going to sustain, what we call it, abstain. We'll go to a meeting of the United Nations Security Council, or we'll go, but we are not going to vote. We are just going to abstain. Now, when you're abstaining, what are you saying? Are you making a statement? What are you saying? What is your statement? You're saying, I'm not voting because I'm afraid what will happen to me or not. So other countries are clearly stating that we are voting with Russia, or we are voting against Ukraine, or we are voting against the embargo, and so on and so forth. Listen to how even the leaders of the African continent voted during the Gaddafi period. So the Gaddafi debacle, also, it was a representation of that type of Pan-Africanism that is pragmatic, you understand? So even they themselves, when they engage on the understanding of unity of the African people, or the African unity, whether utilizing the vehicle of the African Union or any other, it is a pragmatic approach. So that's what you also see with Julius Malema and others. That's what you see also in the Pan-African Parliament. That's what you see also in the African Union. And in the African Union, you would see that they would take policy decisions that are so like stupid to a point that you don't understand how do they come up with. Like, for instance, now there was a resolution of silencing the guns for 2020, and they took that, I think it was in 2015, and none of those guns were silenced. And now they came up with 2017 with another something of creating a better Africa, a united Africa by 2063, and want to tell me that the people who are in the United African Unity, AU, today, who are making those decisions, do you think that they will be living or alive in 2063? And this is one of the things that happens when you're using gradualist orientation, and you always shift the goalpost because somebody else is influencing you, including the funding of by the so-called powerful nations. You understand? So there is nothing wrong. I think there is nothing wrong to refer to a group of people. And Rutendo, I think he's wrong here to argue that Julius Malema is not a Pan-Africanist. Maybe he could say he's not a revolutionary Pan-Africanist as outlined or as understood by him, and maybe taking the line of the Kwame Nkrumahs and Sekou Touré. I'm not mentioning Robert Sobukwe deliberately because Robert Sobukwe's approach of Pan-Africanism was very nuanced, if one were to say. It was a very nuanced. He was a very, very smart at times, pragmatic, intellectual, but revolutionary at the same time. So he was able to play around these dynamics because he had read almost all of these guys who came before him, and then he had consolidated his ideas of what it means to unite the African people, and his interpretation of Pan-Africanism. Now, one of the things that brings us into this conversation, whether Pan-Africanism is an unreal ideal, is on the basis that probably we can blame the aspect that the one that was supposed to have, the one Yabo Nkrumah had not been applied. So therefore, because it has not been applied, then we can't therefore say in total, in preciseness that it is working or it has worked. But on another side, the one that is pragmatic, whatever the gains, if there are gains, it has not solved the problems of the African people. Look what France still does to the African countries, claiming money, stealing money. Look what South Africa does to the continent, where it has become the gateway to the African continent using neoliberal orientations and other policy formulation, influencing the AU in a certain direction. But also there are other goals that were achieved through these elements. So the pragmatic approach has at some way suffered. I think it has suffered because it has not entirely achieved one, alleviation of poverty. 58 years ago, there was a need for an alleviation of poverty. It's 58 years later, Africa still is in poverty. 58 years ago, there was a question of how do we unite, and that question has not been resolved because the dominant Pan-Africanism that is in the continent is the one that says we will eat this elephant in small pieces. Now, what is my view, therefore, on Pan-Africanism, whether it is an unreal ideal? I think that Pan-Africanism is not an unreal is not an unreal ideal. It's a real ideal, but it depends on the interpretation or also on the application. The majority of people who are in the revolutionary outlook of the Pan-Africanism, they tend to be more intellectual, theoretical, and therefore not organize programs that are going to engage the communities and the societies. And on the basis of that, that's when now majority of people would want to criticize Pan-Africanism on the basis that that type of Pan-Africanism is one way to say it is an unreal idea. So the people who are actually doing or on the revolutionary aspect are the causes of the problem of the critique, because they tend to not embark on programs. One of the things that I think revolutionary Pan-Africanists, those that are towing the line, Nkrumah and others, they should have took maybe the line of if one were to say the line of using programs of having maybe exchange students that are going to be you've got students that are coming from South Africa going to East Africa, from the student from East Africa coming to South Africa, East, West Africa, so that there is that movement, because the majority of people do not understand the dynamic of the African continent. I want to stop here a little bit. I'll play a video of just for 2 minutes because my battery on the other side is dying, and I'm going to log on using another gadget. So I'll just play this video on this side, and then it will be for a few minutes, as I am trying to ensure that we are able to connect for the few minutes that are remaining. But it is important that we understand this dynamic of this dynamic of the differences of these Pan-Africanism and these pragmatic approaches. And I'm not saying, therefore, I'm saying it deliberately. I'm not saying that Julius Malema is not a Pan-Africanist. I'm saying if he is a Pan-Africanist, he is the type of Pan-Africanist that comes from that school of thought of pragmatism. So enjoy this video for a few minutes, and I'll connect with the other gadget. Thank you. I'll see you in the... So as I was saying that I'm sorry for that. As I mentioned that today we are suffering from load shedding, but I wanted to make sure, and I couldn't play that video because my gadget on the other side just quickly it died on me. So what I was trying to explain was that
even to make such a claim against people like Julius, it tends to be a little bit unfair on that basis. But is he therefore a revolutionary Pan-Africanist? I don't think so. Is he using Pan-Africanism for his own benefit? I think he does, and I don't have a gripe with that, because majority of politicians in the neoliberal political setup, they tend to use whatever that is popular to push their own narrative. So now that we clarified that aspect about these dynamics, you would then look at the policies, go to the policies of the African Union, which is the so-called custodian of Pan-Africanism in the continent. You look at those policies, like for instance, there is the regional integration policies. There is now the free trade agreement, which is one of the good things about it. But the only issue is that if you can dig deep into that, you tend to understand that even itself, it is principled, or it is standing on the principles of neoliberalism. You understand? So even the interpretation of the type of society, the economic models that the Africa must unite on, are on the basis of what you would refer to as neoliberalism. So those are the elements, and some people would then say, no, but socialism does not work. Maybe it doesn't work. I'm not sure where has it been applied to the fullest, to a point that it has been proven that it doesn't work, because in the societies that it was being applied at, it has not been given sufficient time to even operate to prove itself. So I think that's where one of the problems come in. And also when it comes to Pan-Africanism, whether it is an unreal ideal, it has not been given a full expression, because even those ones who are part and parcel of the so-called Pan-Africanist bloc, one, majority of them has not been in positions of power that are, I'm talking about not the revolutionary outlooks, have not been in the position of power extensively to ensure that they apply their type of understanding of, or the revolutionary aspect of Pan-Africanism, not the pragmatic one. Look at Kwame Nkrumah. At some point, he was a promising figure, dealt with, and the others. But you look at the pragmatists. The pragmatists have been allowed a space to present their type of Pan-Africanism and so on. So you must understand this dynamic. And I made an example about the Pan-African Parliament. If you look at the Pan-African Parliament, maybe now that I'm saying it, you never know, because I was saying that even the custodians of Pan-Africanism in South Africa, they are not even represented in that a political party that refers to itself as a Pan-Africanist party, it does not have a representation in the Pan-African Parliament. That sits in Midrand. In the PAC, which is a political party in South Africa that is regarded as a Pan-Africanist organization, it doesn't have a representation. Fortunately or unfortunately, maybe there is a criteria that they are using to determine who must go there and who must not go there. And I think if they wanted to save the face, they could have at least for once give somebody from the PAC and go and be part of that. Do I say the current crop of the PAC would make a better submission? I don't know. I don't think so. But now that I'm saying it, there is the Speaker of Parliament, Mamuna's view, I know that you are very close to some members of the PAC. You can then begin to go and talk to them and say, hey guys, I'm going to bring you in the Pan-African Parliament, because that is important. You can't therefore have a Pan-African Pan-African parliament and you don't have a political party represented. But also another problem is that the majority of Pan-Africanists in South Africa, those that are on the radical side or the non-pragmatic or the revolutionary side, they never go and protest in that to show that what is happening inside is not the same as what they are opting for. Some would then argue to say, no, it's neither here nor there. That is a neoliberal Pan-African parliament and so on and so forth. But you need to put yourself there. You need to present yourself there and show the world that there is another outlook of Pan-Africanism, not this one that is more pragmatic. Now, as I was attending that Mistra conversation, I heard one doctor, I think it's Dr. Nsaluba, he was making an argument to say that some people argue against the pragmatic approach. They're saying, had we opted for the revolutionary outlook, the Nkrumah approach of unite or perish, had we opted for that, things would have been better. And he then says the pragmatic approach was the best approach, but it was given a cup without a handle by the colonialists. So even the application of the unity of the African people and the implementation of Pan-Africanism could not have been achieved. The poverty alleviation and all other elements could have not been achieved because the colonialists created a trap for the independent states, which they knew that in 10 years' time, that trap is going to catch them. So the pragmatists are saying it was the colonialists who are to blame because they created a trap for them. So that was, I think, I hope I'm not misrepresenting his argument, but I think that's what I heard. And he then says, for some people, they say, had we taken the Nkrumah approach, probably we would not be in this situation. Some of the things would have been achieved. And then he disagrees with that argument of the latter argument. He opts for the pragmatist because majority of the people who were in that conference were moderates or pragmatists, or they were arguing for a pragmatist approach. So here is my view, therefore. I'm therefore saying, I think it would have been better that as Nyerere would later agree that Nkrumah was right, is the fact that had that been the case, I think the African people and the African continent would have probably found a resemblance of unity amongst themselves, because one of the things that was going to unite them was when they were destroying or when they were destroyed, they were going to be destroyed as a unit. And also when they were to rebuild, I think they would have had to rebuild together because they would have known that we do not have anybody else, but we have our own. So the same principle that is utilized by Steve Biko when he says, black men, you are on your own. So I think the Africans would have understood that reality because the trap was not going to be a trap for one sovereign state in Ghana, as it happened with the CIA-led coup, and also in another part of the country, in another part of the continent, and so on. So there was going to be a dissemination of the entire continent because the entire OAU would have agreed to say, we are doing the unity now. We are doing the Nkrumahist outlook now. So if we are suffering, we are going to suffer together. And when we are building, we will therefore build together as a group of people who are united in one objective. So I think that would have been, it's something that I don't know if it would have happened, but I think that it would have been something that could have been beneficial. So I'm making a critique also against the argument of pragmatic Pan-Africanism on the basis that up to this day, the poverty alleviation, there's still coups that are taking place in this continent. Even the Westphalian state-centered approach of the society, the sovereignty, all of those things, they all are adopted from the European way of thinking. And I think had we had some of these elements using the radical outlook of Nkrumah, I think maybe some of the things we would have not been in at the moment. We would have not been suffering from. Now, the other aspect is that when you look at South Africa, currently South Africa is always contesting with Nigeria when it comes to economy and so on. But one of the things that you must understand, and South Africa will constantly be leading at one time or the other, because South Africa has got the largest number of European descendants in the African continent outside of the African continent. And therefore, even the interests of the imperialists in the form of the United States, in the form of the United Kingdom, they would always use South Africa for their gain. So if you find that South Africa becomes the gateway of to the African continent, even when it comes to this so-called application of the free trade, you can see that it is being pushed to every time when they are talking about the free trade, it's always about South Africa first and then the others and then the other countries. So that dynamic as well is also influenced by the fact that the people who are in South Africa in the dominant discourse of Pan-Africanism are coming from the moderate group. They are applying the pragmatist, excuse me, the pragmatist approach. Now, even the policy formulation, economic, international relations policies, the conversation of how to deal with the geopolitics will always be within that particular dynamic, and that results in the suffering of the African people, whether one agrees with that or not. But the majority of the African people are suffering, and I think it is 58 years later since the question of the calling of the unity of the Africans has been posed. And to this day, it has not happened. Now, the pragmatists are coming in and are raising these issues of saying, no, we must first start with regional integration, then we will do the other region, the SADC, and then the ECOWAS, and then and all those elements. And the others are saying, no, maybe the strong nations must start. Like, for instance, South Africa, if it's ready to unite, it must unite with Lesotho and the others in the SADC. Now, the problem of that, again, is going to be that South Africa will think that it is a big brother. It will think that it is an exceptional aspect of the unity of the African continent. It will think that it is the driver of the unity of the African people. You understand this dynamic that I'm talking about? So all that I'm saying is, I do not think that Pan-Africanism is an unreal ideal. I think that the influences within how to unite and to apply and to ensure that Pan-Africanism is successful has been hindered by this the dominant group, the Monrovia group, which won the OAU, and it has won even the AU outlook, and it has defined, therefore, the type of Pan-Africanism that Africa begins to talk to or thinks about. And the people who are saying they are Pan-Africanists, the majority of the people who are saying they are Pan-Africanists, they tend to be the pragmatists. They tend to be the moderates. They are mostly the group that doesn't want to, what do you call this, to rock the boat. You understand? Now, it does not mean, therefore, that there are no radicals. There is a frustration. When I was in that conference of Mistra, I could hear in the audience the frustration of the people who were asking questions that, okay, I think this group or this person, because you can hear this person comes from a probably the Nkrumahist bloc, that means the Casablanca bloc, that is more of a revolutionary outlook. And then also you could so, and you can see the frustration, and their frustration is constantly being reflected, because they feel like whatever approach of Pan-Africanism that is dominant and its policies, it is not beneficial, it is not benefiting anybody. One last aspect which I want to share with you, my viewers, and I think that it is an important thing. There was a lady from Tanzania who was very, very critical of the land question in South Africa. And she was saying that the Tanzanian people, they've got the land, they've got the dignity where they are using the land to farm, and it provides with them also food security and so on. And the pain with her is that now she is here in South Africa and she sees that the indignity of the African people in South Africa, where the property clause and which relates to the land question is seem to be tiptoed around, and the majority of the African people are suffering. And they're suffering because the approach, the application of the African unity and Pan-Africanism has been that of a pragmatic approach. So you can understand all these dynamics. So how you then define, and when somebody talks about and tells you that Pan-Africanism is an unreal ideal, it is not applicable or it is irrelevant. I don't think that it is irrelevant. I think it is something that is very much relevant. It is it needs to be utilized, especially in the case that you can see what France still does, you can see what British still does, you can see what America does, and other imperialist forces are still doing in the African continent. And I think the anecdote to that is a revolutionary Pan-Africanism, not only the pragmatic Pan-Africanism, but also you can apply pragmatism at certain elements. So you don't necessarily have to be one thing at the same time. So you can be many things at different times for the benefit of the African people and the unity. So as an organization or as a channel that seeks to bring in political knowledge and an understanding, all what I was trying to do in this conversation is to say that Pan-Africanism, firstly, I don't think it is an unreal ideal. It is something that is real and tangible because it speaks about the material and the spiritual interest. I always speak about that. It speaks about the tangible aspects. But the people who tend to apply it, or those who adhere to it, most of the time they tend to speak from an idealistic point of view. Two, I want you to understand that when you read and when you watch this, when you comment, when you talk to me, when you engage me on this, I want you to understand that the application of Pan-Africanism, the dominant group is the Monrovia group, the pragmatic or the gradualists. It is those gradualists that are there in the African Union. They are a dominant group. And that dominant group is the one that does not want to rock the boat. So it does not mean they are not Pan-Africanists. Maybe they are Pan-Africanists that are more pragmatists. They are, some of them, they are cowards, because you could hear on the video that majority of African leaders, they accept certain things to be called corrupt and so on, because they want to be protected by these imperialist forces. Now, what I want you to understand is that to make claims that are not properly backed, it is very dangerous as a person who wants to understand and learn politics. And when you get into a political terrain, to go and say, as Rutendo said, remember what I said, Rutendo I do not doubt Rutendo. No, I don't doubt him. I think he's a very, very moral and upright guy. But the only reason why I was criticizing him on this particular aspect, the reasons that he gave, those 3 reasons that he gave to therefore locate Julius Malema as not a Pan-Africanist. I'm saying he is, or he might be a Pan-Africanist, but he might be that pragmatist Pan-Africanist. 2, I'm saying he might be using Pan-Africanism, the radical rhetoric, not for the benefit of the African people, but for the political expedience. But 3, I'm saying, therefore, if we are to say he is not a Pan-Africanist, let us not use the reasons that Rutendo gave. Let us give the correct reasons which Julius has put into the fore. Those are his organization, and he says his outlook is an outlook of ideologically, they are a Marxist-Leninist, Cabralist, I think a Cabralist part, or it was a Marxist-Leninist Fanonian, Marxist-Leninist Fanonian movement. You understand? So you can use those elements and say, then I don't think when you are adhering to this, you are then a Pan-Africanist, or you become a Pan-Africanist only at a level when you're defining the Fanonian outlook, because Fanon was a Pan-Africanist. So these are the elements that I wanted to bring into this conversation, and I think for the next month, which is the month of October, I think we would be engaging extensively on with the guests from the African continent, and I think we will be talking more on the experiences of the African people, experiences of the African people in the continent, maybe also extract a little bit of the ideals of Pan-Africanism. But I want you guys to understand that Pan-Africanism is not an unreal ideal, and I think it is an anecdote to the situations that the Africans find themselves in. But the problem is the dominant approach of Pan-Africanism and the unity of the African people. Let me stop there, hoping that this session was also very fruitful and very much helpful in the way that at least you who is watching and who is listening, you were able to get a sense of what I'm raising around 2 points. One, that Pan-Africanism as an ideal, it's not an unreal ideal, it is implementable, but I think the people who are that you need to understand that there are two elements that we are there on the Pan-African approaches. There is this radical one, there is this a pragmatic one. The pragmatic one is the most dominant one. You find it in the Thabo Mbeki school of thought and all the other ones. And then the other one is the one that was coming from Nkrumah, and it has been suffocated extensively when you look at it in these days. So. And even those people who were at some point radical in Pan-Africanism have then tended to be stating that they want to deal with the bread and butter issues type of Pan-Africanism. So those were the things that I wanted to raise. So I hope you have enjoyed this discussion. I hope you have, I did not disappoint. I hope that you have learned something in relation to this. If there is anything that you would like to say to us, make sure that you say it on Point the Politique on all the social media platforms. Send us a comment, engage us, and we will be willing to take this conversation further. Umtungwa, yangwa yomalingi, undima kankumbuzo, uthi, inkomo ebomvu, uthando lwethu kadlanga, uthi, thank you very much for joining us. See you again next week as we further engage these topics. Bye-bye.